bit better than when she's
Take a
not
deep breath.
breathing.
What's happening?
She's cold.
You're under yourself, sister. Get a deeper breath. What's
Oh
happening?
my God, would you please help me?
August 24th, 2020, Houston, Texas. The clock ticks past midnight when a 911 dispatcher answers a call that pierces the silence. A mother's voice trembles, barely holding together. Her 8-month-old daughter, Savayah Mason, isn't breathing. She's cold, unresponsive. Within minutes, paramedics and police swarm an apartment on West Park Drive, their flashing lights painting the night red and blue. They brace for a rescue. Instead, they step into a nightmare no training could prepare them for. Baby Savayah isn't just gone. Her tiny body, fractured, bound, lifeless, whispers a truth too horrific to grasp. This wasn't a crib death. This wasn't fate. This was a father's hands. Luis Luna, 23, turned against his own child. A betrayal carved into her fragile skin. But the scene holds more than grief. It holds questions. A mother weeping in the corner. A father pacing, his story already shifting. And bloodied wipes, crumpled in a garbage bag, waiting to speak. Days later, the autopsy cracks the case wide open. Savayah Mason, just 8 months old, had been assaulted, her wrists tied, her life snuffed out by suffocation. The reason? A father's rage, not at his daughter, but at her mother, his ex-girlfriend Crystal Cantu. A revenge so calculated, it stunned the city. Luna claimed he'd tried to save her, that he'd found her that way. Yet the evidence, those wipes, the bruises, the timeline, painted a different picture. A jury would later agree, sentencing him to life without parole in October 2024. But the story doesn't end there. Why did Luna call his own mother that night, hours before the 911 call, saying nothing was wrong? How did 4 years pass before justice landed? And what drove a man to erase his own daughter over a breakup? The deeper you look, the more the shadows shift. This is the story of Luis Luna and the unthinkable murder of baby Savayah Mason. Welcome to Unreal Minds. Before we go further, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell. This is one of the most haunting cases we've ever uncovered. In Houston, Texas, where the heat presses down and the city never sleeps, Luis Luna grew up. Born and raised in its sprawl, he was a young man with a shadow over him. By 23, he was a father to an 8-month-old girl named Savayah Mason. But his life wasn't steady. Trouble followed him, carved into a past heavy with domestic violence and a need to control. Friends saw it, how he'd tighten his grip on people, how his temper could snap like dry wood. His relationships, they crumbled under that weight, everyone marked by arguments and mistrust. Then there was Crystal Cantu, Savayah's mother. What they had wasn't calm or kind. It was loud, messy, broken, fights that left marks, a bond that couldn't hold. By August 2020, they were separated, living apart, but still tied by their little girl. Crystal trusted Luis with Savayah that weekend, a choice she'd never stop questioning. Friends had seen the signs. They called him controlling and said he ruled over those close to him. His past girlfriends, they'd felt it too, hands too tight, words too sharp. But no one saw this coming. Not yet. On August 24th, 2020, everything changed. A phone rang in the dark. Crystal's voice, shaking, begging for help. She'd gone to pick up Savayah from Luis's apartment near Telge Road. What she found stopped her cold. Her baby wasn't moving. First responders sped through Houston's streets, lights flashing, hearts pounding. They stepped into that apartment expecting a rescue. Instead, they found Savayah, tiny, still, her body bruised and wrists red with faint lines. Luis was there, his story falling apart fast. He said she'd just stopped breathing. Then he blamed a car seat. Its straps were too tight. But the truth was louder than his words. Blood-stained wipes, shoved in a trash bag, told a story he couldn't erase. Investigators moved in, piecing it together. An autopsy laid it bare. Savayah had been hit, tied up, suffocated by her own father. Why? Revenge, they said. Not against his daughter, but against Crystal. For leaving him, for breaking free. A baby caught in a man's anger. But wait, there's more. Hours before that 911 call, Luis dialed his own mother, calmly told her everything was fine. What was he hiding then? And after that night, he ran. 4 years before, a courtroom saw him again. How did he slip away so long? What pushed him to turn on his own child? This story doesn't end here. It's only the start of Luis Luna and the murder that tore a family apart. It was August 24th, 2020, in Houston, Texas. The air was thick and warm. Crystal Cantu pulled up to Luis Luna's apartment on West Park Drive. She unbuckled her 8-month-old daughter, Savayah Mason, and handed her to Luna, the baby's father. Crystal gave Savayah a quick kiss on the forehead. It was routine. She trusted him. They'd had their struggles, arguments, breakups, but he was still Savayah's dad. She climbed back into her car and drove off, the headlights fading into the night. That kiss was the last time she'd see her daughter alive. Later that evening, Crystal's phone buzzed. A text from Luna. She's fine, sleeping now. The words were short, casual. Crystal stared at them. They felt hollow. Her chest tightened, but she brushed it off. He wouldn't hurt their baby, would he? Hours ticked by. Then, past midnight, her phone rang. It was Luna. His voice trembled. Savayah's not breathing. Get here now. Crystal's heart stopped. She called 911, screaming into the line. My baby's not moving, please, send help. Sirens wailed as paramedics and police sped to the apartment. They kicked open the door. Savayah lay in her car seat, her small chest still. No rise, no fall. The medics rushed to her, working fast, but her body was already cold. Luna paced nearby, hands shaky. The car seat, he said. She must have suffocated. The officers nodded at first. Accidents happen. But then they looked closer. The straps weren't tight. They dangled loose around her. And in the corner, a trash bag caught their eye. Inside, blood-stained baby wipes. Luna's story started to crack. The next morning, the autopsy report landed. It wasn't suffocation. Savayah had been attacked. Her wrists showed marks. Someone had tied her up. Her life was taken, deliberately, violently. By who? All eyes turned to Luna. Detectives dug deeper. Why would a father do this? The answer came in whispers from the investigation. Revenge. Not against Savayah, but Crystal. She'd left him, moved on. He couldn't handle it, so he took their daughter's life to punish her. But there was more. That night, before the 911 call, Luna phoned his own mother. Everything's okay, he told her. Hours later, Savayah was dead. What was he covering up? And why did he run, disappearing for 4 years until the law finally tracked him down in 2024? The pieces didn't fit yet. This was no accident. It was a crime, and the truth was still clawing its way out. The morgue was cold, silent, but the truth screamed loud. Savayah Mason, only 8 months old, lay on the table. The autopsy told a story no one wanted to hear. She'd been sexually assaulted. Her small neck carried marks, faint but clear. Someone had tied her up. And the final blow? Suffocation. Not a mistake. Not a tragedy of chance. Someone chose to end her life. The room felt heavy as the medical examiner wrote it down. This was murder. Investigators went back to Luis Luna's apartment. They dug through every corner. Then, in the trash, they found it. Baby wipes, stained with blood. Luna had said Savayah just stopped breathing. A crib death, he claimed. But blood doesn't show up for no reason. They tested it. Savayah's blood. No doubt. The wipes stared back at them, a quiet witness to something awful. And those marks on her neck? They lined up with straps from her own car seat. Pulled too tight. His story wasn't holding up. Police huddled in a small room, staring at the evidence. One of them broke the silence. "This was no accident," he said. "This was planned." Heads nodded. They'd seen crime before, but this hit different. A father's hands, meant to protect, had turned deadly. And the name on everyone's lips? Luis Luna. He was the only one there that night. The only one who could explain. But he wasn't talking. Days later, a new detail slipped out. Luna had called his mum hours before dialing 911. "Everything's okay," he told her. His voice was calm, too calm. Then, nothing. Until Savayah was gone. What happened in those hours? The question hung in the air, unanswered. And there was more. Crystal Cantu, Savayah's mom, had walked away from Luna months before. He didn't take it well. Was this his way of hitting back? Taking her baby to punish her? Investigators started to think so. The community heard the news and erupted. People marched, voices loud, demanding answers. How could this happen? How could it take 4 years to drag Luna into court? In those courtroom sketches, you'd see it. Prosecutors holding up the autopsy report, Luna sitting still, eyes blank. But back then, as the evidence stacked high, one thing was clear. Justice was coming. Slow, maybe, but certain. And when it landed, the whole story would spill out. What drove a father to this, and who else knew? The clock in the interrogation room ticked louder with every passing minute. Luis Luna sat there, his hands clasped tight, knuckles white. 2 detectives stood over him, their shadows stretching across the cold concrete floor. They'd been at it for hours, hammering him with questions. "What happened to Savayah, Luis?" they asked, again and again. At first, Luna said she'd just stopped breathing. Some fluke, a quiet accident. Then he pointed to her car seat, claiming the straps choked her. The detectives didn't flinch. They kept pushing, and Luna's words started to stumble. Finally, he threw out his last card. "I tried CPR," he said, his voice thin, shaky. "I tried to save her." But here's the thing about liars. They trip over their own feet. And Luna? He was about to fall hard. The detectives had been watching him close, catching every twitch, every flicker in his eyes. His stories didn't line up. One minute, Savayah was fine. The next, she wasn't. The CPR tale, it sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced it in his head. The lead detective crossed his arms, staring Luna down. "You're leaving something out," he said, his voice low, steady. Luna shifted in his seat, wiping sweat off his brow. He didn't answer. That's when they hit him with it. "We pulled your trash, Luis," the second detective said, dropping a plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside, bloodied baby wipes, Savayah's blood. Luna froze, his eyes locked on the bag. "I don't know how that got there," he mumbled, but his voice cracked, giving him away. The room went quiet, the air heavy. The detectives didn't need him to talk anymore. They had the proof, and it was screaming louder than he ever could. The evidence kept piling up, each piece tighter than the last. The autopsy told a story Luna couldn't dodge. Savayah hadn't died by accident. She'd been assaulted. brutally, relentlessly. Marks on her tiny wrists showed she'd been tied up. Her airway was blocked, her life snuffed out. And the forensics? They pointed one way. Luna's DNA was on her body, on those wipes. His phone records. They nailed him to the apartment all night. No stepping out, no breaks, no excuses. The detectives spread it all out, watching Luna's face as the truth closed in. "You were there, Luis," the lead detective said, leaning in close. "You did this." Luna's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists. He stared at the table, breaths coming fast. Then, so soft you could barely hear it, he let it slip. "I didn't want it to go that far," he whispered. The detectives froze. What did he mean? Was it a confession? A mistake? They didn't push him. Not yet. They had enough. Hours later, the metal door clanged shut behind him. Luis Luna was arrested, charged with capital murder. The cuffs were cold, the charge heavy. But as he shuffled out, one question burned brighter than the rest. What did he mean by that far? Was there more he wasn't saying? The evidence had caught him, but the full story. That was still locked inside his head, waiting to break free. Justice had started, but it was far from over. The courtroom in Harris County, Texas, was heavy with silence. 10 days stretched out like years for the jury. They sat there, 12 strangers, forced to face a father's unthinkable crime. Luis Luna, accused of murdering his own daughter, Savayah Mason, just 8 months old. The prosecution had a story to tell, and it was a hard one. They said Luna did it out of revenge. Crystal Cantu, Savayah's mother, had walked away from him. He couldn't handle it, so he took her baby instead. The prosecutor stood up, voice clear, eyes sharp. She walked the jury through it, step by step. The ropes around Savayah's tiny wrists, the bruises on her body, the way Luna tried to cover it up, dumping her like trash. "This was no mistake," she said. "This was payback." The jury shifted in their seats. One woman clutched her notepad. Another stared at Luna, her jaw tight. The evidence kept coming. Phone records, a neighbor's testimony, the cold facts of the autopsy. It was too much to ignore. Then the defense took their turn. Luna's lawyer got up, voice loud, hands moving fast. "He wasn't himself," he said. "His mind was broken. He didn't mean it." They wanted the jury to see a sick man, not a killer. But the room stayed cold. The jury didn't budge. They'd heard too much already. The 911 call with Crystal screaming, the photos no one could unsee. A man in the back row shook his head. A woman covered her mouth, eyes wide. Shock, disgust, horror. That's what filled the air. The prosecution wasn't done. They called a forensic expert. He took the stand, calm and quiet. "We tested the ropes," he said. Luna's fingerprints were all over them. The room stopped breathing. The lawyer's face fell. The jury leaned forward, some gasping, others staring hard at Luna. He didn't look back, just sat there, hands folded, like he didn't hear it. That was the moment, the twist no one saw coming. His own hands tied him to the crime. The end came quick. The prosecutor faced the jury one last time. "Luis Luna chose revenge," she said. "He chose to take a baby's life. Don't let him walk away from that." The defense tried again, softer now. "He's lost everything," the lawyer said. "Have mercy." But the jury's eyes were hard. They'd heard enough. They filed out, steps heavy, faces grim. Hours passed. Then they returned. The foreperson stood, voice shaking just a little. "Guilty," she said. The room exploded, quietly. Crystal Cantu broke down, tears soaking her hands. Luna didn't move, didn't blink. The judge spoke next, words like steel. "Luis Luna You are sentenced to life without parole. Guards stepped up. They cuffed him. They led him out. His footsteps echoed, then faded. Justice had its say. Luna would never walk free again. But as the courtroom cleared, one question hung there, heavy and unanswered. Is that enough? Can any punishment bring back Savayah? Can it heal Crystal's heart? The law locked him away, but the hurt, that stays forever. The trial was over, but the story didn't end. Outside the courthouse, Savayah Mason's mother, Crystal Cantu, faced a sea of microphones. Her eyes were red, her voice cracked. She'd just heard the judge say the words, Luis Luna, life without parole. But those words didn't bring her baby back. Savayah was my world, Crystal said, her hands clutching a photo of her little girl. She was only one. She didn't get a chance. The crowd around her grew still. You could hear the wind, the sobs. Crystal wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a voice, loud and broken, demanding someone listen. Houston woke up fast. Savayah's name was everywhere, on TV, on phones, on signs held high. People couldn't let it go. A father accused of tying up his own child, leaving her to die. The autopsy said it all. Ropes, bruises, a tiny body too weak to fight. The city boiled over. Crowds marched down streets, their voices shaking the air. No more, they chanted. Save our kids. Vigils lit up the night, candles glowing for a girl gone too soon. Online, hashtags spread like fire. Hashtag justice for Savayah. Hashtag protect the children. Everyone wanted answers. How did this happen? Who let it slip through? Crystal stepped into the fight. She stood at a rally, her face tired but fierce. The laws aren't enough, she told the crowd. They failed my daughter. They're failing others right now. Heads nodded, fists raised. She wasn't alone. People clapped, shouted, begged for change. Lawyers joined in, saying Texas needed tougher rules, better checks, faster action. One woman held a sign that stuck with everyone. One child lost is one too many. The outrage wasn't just loud, it was a promise. Back in the courtroom, the case had gripped everyone. 10 days of evidence, each one heavier than the last. The jury saw it all. Photos of ropes, wipes with Luna's prints, a timeline that trapped him. The prosecutor's voice was steady. He did this. He can't walk free. Luna's lawyers fought back, saying the police got it wrong, pushing for doubt. The room held its breath when the verdict dropped. Guilty. Capital murder. One juror stared at the floor. Another hugged her arms tight. Then the judge spoke, his words final. Life, no parole. Luna didn't move. Not a flinch. But here's the twist. It's not finished. Word slipped out. Luna's team might appeal. They're digging, claiming mistakes were made. Evidence lost. Witnesses ignored. No one knows yet. The case could drag on, keeping Crystal trapped in the fight. And the system? It's under a spotlight. Experts say child protection laws are shaky. Too many holes, too little time. We're racing the clock, one advocate warned. Another child could be next. Savayah's death opened a door, but no one's sure what's on the other side. Crystal keeps going. She's at every meeting, every protest. I won't stop, she says. Savayah can't be forgotten. Her pain fuels her. She's pushing lawmakers, begging for new rules, better shelters, stricter checks. Her daughter's photo stays with her, a reminder of why. The crowd hears her, feels her. She's not just speaking, she's shaking them awake. Savayah Mason never got to take her first steps, never got to say her first words. She was a baby, caught in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Her life was taken, and no sentence can fix that. But her story, it cannot be forgotten. It has to push us. It has to mean something. If you're watching this, Don't look away. If you see a child hurting, hear something off. Say it. Call it out. Protect the innocent. Don't let another kid suffer in silence. There's a number on your screen right now. Use it. Thank you for watching. If you want more stories like this, subscribe to Unreal Minds. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.